AITA for exposing my parents after they prioritized my sister's party over my treatment? I'm Olivia, 31, the younger daughter in a family where my older sister, Heather, has always been treated like evidence that my parents did everything right. I was the part they explained away. Heather had stressful weeks. I had patterns. Heather forgot birthdays because she was busy. I forgot one phone call after spending 6 hours at urgent care. And my mother told everyone I only cared about myself. When Heather needed help, it was family supporting family. When I needed help, it was another crisis I had created. I learned early that crying in front of my mother, Carolyn, was a mistake. She could take one shaky breath and turn it into a diagnosis. If I raised my voice, I was unstable. If I stayed calm, I was cold. If I stopped talking, I was punishing everyone. My father, Stephen, rarely said anything cruel directly. He preferred phrases like, "Let's not make this worse," usually while staring at the floor. For years, I mistook that for neutrality. It took me too long to understand that silence always helped the person doing the damage. The medical problem started after an injury to my left leg. At first, everyone, including me, thought recovery would be slow but straightforward. Then the pain changed. My foot started going numb at random, and my knee would buckle without warning. I nearly fell while carrying groceries and had to sit on the kitchen floor until the tingling eased. An urgent care doctor sent me back to the specialist with discharge papers full of phrases I tried not to Google at 2 in the morning. My physical therapist stopped one session halfway through and told me she wasn't comfortable continuing until the specialist reviewed the new symptoms. The clinic had a treatment opening, but my insurance authorization was still delayed. Between the authorization issue, my deductible, and the clinic's policy, I needed to pay an $8,600 deposit to keep the appointment. The billing coordinator was kind but direct. "If the authorization clears, we'll adjust everything afterward," she told me. "But we can't hold the slot without the deposit." "How long before the next opening?" I asked. There was a pause. "It could be several months." Several months meant more weakness, more compensation, and a greater chance that the problem would become harder to correct. Nobody told me I would never walk normally again. They also refused to promise that waiting would be harmless. The deadline was Friday at noon. I spent the rest of that day calling the insurer, the clinic's financial office, a medical credit company, and 2 nonprofit programs. I asked about payment plans, partial deposits, and appeals. I printed the clinic's written notice and placed it with my urgent care discharge papers and physical therapy notes. By Wednesday night, I was out of options. That was when I called my parents. I did not call expecting a gift. I asked for a temporary loan and offered to sign repayment terms. I had already written down exactly what I planned to say because talking to my mother without notes was like walking into a room where the furniture moved whenever I looked away. Carolyn answered on speakerphone. I knew because I heard the television in the background and my father clearing his throat nearby. "I need to ask you both something," I said. "The clinic needs an $8,600 deposit by Friday to keep my treatment appointment. Insurance is delayed. I've tried the payment plans and outside assistance. I can show you every document, and I'll sign an agreement to pay you back." My mother sighed before I finished. "Olivia, emergencies don't give you the right to raid everyone else's life. I'm not raiding anything. I'm asking for a loan. You always find a way to make a crisis land in our laps." My leg was throbbing from sitting too long, so I stood and leaned against the kitchen counter. Grandma mentioned years ago that there was emergency money set aside for me. I don't know if that still exists, but do not drag my mother into this, Carolyn snapped. That change in her voice was the first thing that felt wrong. Not just unkind. Wrong. Dad finally spoke. "The money isn't sitting there the way you think it is." "What does that mean?" "It means the family has obligations." "What obligations?" "Your sister's engagement expenses are already committed." For a few seconds I thought I had misunderstood him. "You're saying you can't help me keep a medical appointment because you already spent the money on Heather's party?" My mother gave a short, offended laugh. "That is not what he said." "It is exactly what he said. Your sister has waited long enough to be celebrated," she replied. "You don't get to make her engagement feel guilty because your insurance is difficult." The background noise shifted, and then Heather's voice came through the phone. She must have been sitting there the whole time. So you're really making my engagement about your leg? She asked. I didn't call you. No, you called Mom and Dad 2 days before they have to pay the caterer. Same difference. I have a clinic deadline. And I have deposits that are non-refundable. I closed my eyes. This is not about centerpieces versus a medical bill. Heather laughed softly. Maybe being told no for once will humble you. That sentence stayed with me because of how casual she sounded. Not angry. Not defensive. Amused. I ended the call before I said something they could use against me. The next morning, Carolyn posted a photo of Heather and Sean on Facebook. Heather was holding up her ring while my parents stood behind them, smiling under a caption about how beautiful it was when family came together to support one another. I stared at it until my phone dimmed. Then I got a text from my mother. Sunday dinner. 6 o'clock. Please come with a better attitude. Do not bring up money with Grandma. I read the last sentence 3 times. I should have recognized it as a warning. Instead, some stubborn part of me still believed there might be an explanation. Maybe Grandma had mentioned an old account that no longer existed. Maybe my parents had used it during a real family emergency. Maybe they were embarrassed, not dishonest. That was the weakness I kept carrying into every conflict with them. I believed that if I explained myself clearly enough, they might finally respond like people who loved me. Sunday dinner was at my parents' house. Carolyn had set up 2 folding tables in the backyard and covered them with white plastic tablecloths. My Aunt Maureen was there, along with 2 cousins, Grandma Agnes, Heather, and Sean. I arrived 10 minutes early because my knee had been unreliable, and I wanted time to settle before everyone started watching me move. Heather was already seated beside Sean, scrolling through vendor photos on her phone. She glanced at my brace, then at my face. You look intense, she said. I'm in pain. That's not what I meant. Mom came through the back door carrying a bowl of salad. We are not doing tension tonight, she announced. Nobody had said anything. Dinner lasted 12 minutes before she started. Carolyn put down her fork and smiled at the table as though she were about to make a gracious toast. I think celebrations can bring out complicated feelings, she said, especially in people who are struggling with where they are in life. My stomach dropped. Maureen looked up. What are we talking about? Nothing we need to dwell on, Mom said. Olivia has been pressuring us for money and implying that Heather's engagement is somehow responsible for her medical expenses. I did not say that. Heather gave Sean a tired little smile. She called during a family planning meeting and demanded $8,600. I asked for a temporary loan after trying every other option. Carolyn shook her head sadly. Some people see a celebration and immediately ask what they can take from it. I looked around the table. One cousin stared at her plate. Sean's expression tightened as if he had been given a version of the story before I arrived. I asked for help because the clinic gave me a deadline, I said. If I miss the appointment, I may wait months, and the delay could affect my recovery. Sean leaned back in his chair. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. But why can't you let Heather have one good thing without tying it to you? Because Dad told me the money I asked about was committed to her party. Heather dropped her fork. There is no your money, Olivia. That is the problem. You hear that family has savings and decide it belongs to you. I asked about an emergency fund Grandma once mentioned. Agnes stopped chewing. What emergency fund? She asked. Mom answered too quickly. Mom, she's confused. It was an old conversation. Agnes looked at me. What did I mention? Carolyn reached for her water glass. This is exactly why I told you not to bring it up. Grandma doesn't need to be dragged into your financial panic. I am sitting right here, Agnes said. The table went quiet. I turned to her. Years ago, you told me there was money set aside in case I had a medical or educational emergency. I asked Mom and Dad about it because of the clinic deadline. Agnes looked at Carolyn, then Stephen. I set aside $38,000 after your grandfather died. The silence that followed felt physical. My father's face changed before my mother's did. He looked down at his plate. Carolyn set her glass down very carefully. That account was handled years ago. Handled how? Agnes asked. We used family resources as needed. That money was for Olivia. Mom, You're simplifying something you don't understand anymore. Agnes's chin lifted. I understand my own signature. Heather rubbed her forehead. Can we not do this right now? This is supposed to be a nice dinner. I stared at my parents. Is the account gone? Dad sighed. Let's not make this worse. Is it gone? My mother's expression hardened. You are weaponizing an old family arrangement because you were told no. I pushed my chair back. I asked for help because I might not walk right if I wait. Heather muttered. It's one medical bill, Olivia. It is not a personality. I looked at her, and whatever hope I had carried into that dinner finally went quiet. I left without finishing my food. In the car, I locked the doors, put my phone on the charger, and listened to the clinic voicemail again. Hi, Olivia. This is a reminder that your deposit must be received by Friday at noon, or we will need to release the appointment. My battery showed 6%. My leg pulsed from hip to ankle. Through the windshield, I could see my family moving around the backyard table as though I had been the disruption and my departure had restored order. That was the moment I stopped asking them to care and started asking what they were hiding. Agnes called me the next morning. Come by, she said. Don't tell your mother. When I arrived, she had cleared half of her dining table. There were bank envelopes, old folders, a small metal cash box, and a red coffee can with a plastic lid. She pushed the coffee can toward me. What is this? $800. Grandma, no. Take it. I can't take your cash. You can and you will. I sold some tools and a few things I wasn't using. Her husband's tools. My grandfather's tools. I felt heat climb into my face. You should not have had to do that. No, she said. I should not have. She sat across from me and placed both hands on the table. That money was never supposed to be a favor. It was supposed to be yours. The original paperwork was notarized. It named me and stated that the $38,000 was intended for my medical, educational, or emergency support. Because I had been younger and Agnes had wanted help managing the records, Carolyn and Stephen had been listed as the family members responsible for handling distributions. I trusted them with paper, Agnes said. Not permission. She had kept annual bank letters for a while, then stopped receiving them after my mother told her the institution had changed its reporting system. Agnes had accepted that explanation because Carolyn handled much of her paperwork at the time. The older letters showed the original balance. The newer copies Agnes had managed to obtain showed transfers. The first few were small. $1,200, $1,800, $2,500. Several memo lines included my name, Olivia Support, Olivia Medical, Olivia Education Expense. I had never received any of it. My name was on their excuses, I said, not in my bank account. Agnes looked sick. We spent hours matching dates to events I remembered. One withdrawal happened the same week Heather's credit card debt stopped being a family emergency. She had called me crying because she was afraid Sean would find out how much she owed. 2 weeks later, she announced that Mom and Dad had helped her consolidate. Another transfer matched a period when my father had become strangely defensive about a private loan. I remembered hearing my parents argue behind a closed door, then watching Dad tell everyone it had been a misunderstanding. The most recent withdrawals were larger. One lined up with the engagement venue deposit. Another matched the catering payment almost exactly. Agnes had also saved printed emails from Carolyn. In one, my mother wrote that the money had been redirected for family stability. In another, she claimed I had agreed that unused funds could support broader family needs. I had never been asked. Then Agnes picked up an old phone. There's something else, she said. She had kept the device because it contained messages from my grandfather. While searching through old recordings, she had found a voicemail from Carolyn. The timestamp was from 3 years earlier. Agnes pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room. Mom, stop asking the bank for statements. I told you we're handling it. Olivia can never know the account was for her. She'll use it against us, and we do not need another one of her accusations. Let me manage this. The message ended. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. I had spent years wondering whether I was too sensitive, too suspicious, too difficult. That voicemail did not make me feel triumphant. It made me feel hollow. My mother had not misunderstood the account. She had not forgotten its purpose. She had known exactly whose safety net she was spending, and she had planned how to keep me from finding out. That wasn't confusion, I said. That was a cover-up. Agnes closed her eyes. I should have checked sooner. You trusted your daughter. And she counted on that. I wanted to call my mother immediately. I wanted to play the voicemail into the phone and demand that she explain every dollar. Instead, I went home and printed. I printed the clinic's deposit notice, the insurance authorization delay, the urgent care discharge instructions, and the physical therapy notes. I asked the billing coordinator to email written confirmation that the appointment would be released if the deposit was not received by Friday at noon. I copied the fund documents, bank letters, and transfer records. I saved the voicemail in 3 places. I took screenshots of old texts from Carolyn, including one from months earlier that said, "Don't ask Grandma about finances. It confuses her and creates problems." Agnes gave me permission to share the documents with an attorney. The lawyer did not promise an arrest, a dramatic courtroom scene, or instant recovery. She explained that family-held money could become legally messy depending on how the account had been structured and documented. But the paperwork, transfer history, and voicemail were serious enough to justify a formal demand for accounting and repayment. She drafted a letter requiring Carolyn and Stephen to preserve all records, provide a complete accounting of the $38,000, identify each transfer, and begin repayment of improperly used funds. The letter was sent by certified mail. Before my parents received it, I emailed a limited packet to Maureen. I chose her because she was cautious, not because she had always defended me. She had ignored plenty over the years, but she also cared about records and hated being lied to. My email was short. I'm sending this before the engagement party because Mom has already told relatives that I'm trying to take Heather's money. Please review the attached documents. I'm not asking you to choose a side. I'm asking you to look at the dates and signatures before Mom turns this into another story about my behavior. She called 20 minutes later. Her voice was low. I remember Mom talking about that fund, she said. What do you remember? She said she was worried your parents would always prioritize Heather. Carolyn told me years later that everything had been transferred properly and used for your benefit. It wasn't. I can see that. She exhaled. I don't like what I'm looking at, Olivia. And I don't think your mother will either. The clinic deadline came before the engagement party. Agnes's $800 helped. The clinic agreed to a temporary arrangement after receiving part of the deposit, written proof that funds were being pursued, and a smaller short-term payment I could manage. The lawyer's letter also prompted my father to send an initial installment without explanation. It was not generosity. It was fear with a transaction number. My appointment stayed on the calendar. I almost skipped the engagement party. My body was exhausted, and I had no desire to stand under rented lights while my family pretended everything was fine. Then Carolyn called. I did not answer, so she left a voicemail. I expect you to attend and behave appropriately. Heather should not be punished because you've decided to reinterpret old financial decisions. A few minutes later, Heather texted me. Don't show up with an attitude. Sean's family will be there. That settled it. They wanted me present as long as I stayed silent. They wanted the visual of family unity after publicly framing me as jealous and unstable. I went. The party was held in a private event space decorated to look effortless. There were rented cream-colored linens, small flower arrangements, printed seating cards, a photo backdrop with Heather and Sean's initials, and servers carrying past appetizers on black trays. Everything looked expensive in that soft, tasteful way people call simple when they don't want you to ask what it cost. Heather wore a pale blue dress and moved from group to group showing off her ring. Sean greeted me politely but without warmth. I'm glad you came, he said. Are you? He looked uncomfortable. I just want tonight to stay focused. So do I. My parents had received the certified letter that afternoon. I knew because the delivery receipt was in my email. Dad avoided me. Mom did not. She walked up with a tight smile and touched my arm as though we were close. You could have spoken to us before involving a lawyer. I did speak to you. You made demands. I asked for my medical fund. Her fingers tightened. Lower your voice. I had not raised it. This is Heather's night, she said. Then don't make a speech about me. Her eyes narrowed. I have no intention of discussing your behavior. That should have warned me. After dinner, Sean's father gave a warm toast. Maureen said a few words. Agnes stayed seated, both hands around a glass of water. Then Carolyn stood. She lifted her champagne and smiled at Heather. Real family celebrates without keeping score, she said. They show up with love, not a list of what they believe they are owed. Several people looked at me. Heather lowered her eyes in a performance of wounded patience. Mom continued. Some people only remember family when they need money. But tonight is about the daughter who has brought joy, stability, and grace into our lives. There it was. She had received a legal demand that afternoon and still believed she could win by speaking first. Heather took the microphone from her. And some people try to ruin an engagement over one medical bill, she said with a small laugh. But I'm not letting anyone take this away from us. Sean looked at me. Can this not be about you tonight? I stood slowly. The room became so quiet that I could hear a server collecting glasses near the back wall. I placed one sealed envelope on the table in front of my parents. I had not brought a theatrical box or a stack of color-coded binders. The originals were safe. The envelope contained copies. You wanted everyone to know I asked for money, I said. Fine. Then everyone should know whose money it was. Carolyn's smile vanished. Sit down. I did not. I took out the notarized document first. After Grandpa died, Grandma set aside $38,000 for my medical, educational, or emergency needs. Mom and Dad were trusted to manage the paperwork. Heather crossed her arms. That does not mean you get every dollar forever. No, it means they were required to use it for the written purpose. I placed copies of the bank letters beside the document. These are withdrawals labeled as support for me. I never received them. Dad rubbed his forehead. Olivia, this is not the place. You made it the place when you used a toast to call me greedy. I set down the transfer list. This withdrawal happened when Heather's credit card debt was paid. This one lines up with Dad's private loan. This one matches the engagement venue deposit. This one is within 2 days of the catering payment. Sean turned toward Heather. What is she talking about? Heather's face had gone pale. I don't know. Mom and Dad said they were helping. Did you know where it came from? No. Her answer was too fast. I looked at her. You texted Mom 3 months ago asking whether Grandma was still tracking that old Olivia account. Heather stared at me. I placed the screenshot on the table. She had not known every detail, but she had known enough to ask, and then she had accepted the answer that benefited her. That was a joke, she said. No, it wasn't. Carolyn stepped forward. You went through private messages? You sent screenshots to the family printer account. They were in the records Dad forwarded after the demand letter. Dad looked at Mom. She looked back at him with pure fury. Sean picked up the venue receipt. I paid part of this deposit. Yes, I said. And another part appears to have come from the fund. He turned to Heather. I need to know what paid for this party. Sean, not now. Did you know? Not guess. No. I knew there was some old family money. I did not know it belonged to her. You called it the Olivia account. That was just what Mom called it. The room shifted. People who had been avoiding eye contact were now staring directly at my parents. Carolyn's voice became soft and controlled. I did what I had to do to keep this family afloat. Money was moved when there were needs. Olivia benefited from this family for years. Then show me the deposits, I said. Show me one transfer that reached me. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I took out my phone. There is one more thing. My mother lunged for the conversation, not the phone. Do not turn my mother's confusion into another accusation. Agnes stood. My memory is not on trial, she said. I pressed play. Carolyn's recorded voice filled the room. Mom, stop asking the bank for statements. I told you we're handling it. Olivia can never know the account was for her. She'll use it against us. When the voicemail ended, nobody moved. My father stared at the floor. Heather looked at my mother. Sean slowly removed the ring box from his jacket pocket. The photographer had asked for detail shots earlier. He did not take Heather's ring from her finger. He simply held the box in one hand like he had forgotten why it mattered. I looked at Carolyn. That wasn't confusion. That was a cover-up. Her face crumpled. Not because she was sorry. Because she had lost control of the room. You are humiliating this family, she said. No. You humiliated me when you called me selfish for needing treatment. I'm refusing to stay quiet while you spend my safety net on a party. Agnes walked to the table and placed the red coffee can beside the papers. I sold what I had left because you spent what I already gave her, she said. Carolyn began to cry. Mom, please. Don't cry to me about shame after making her beg. Maureen stepped beside Agnes. Carolyn, answer the question. Did you know the account was for Olivia? You don't understand the pressure we were under. That is not an answer. Dad finally spoke. We knew what it was originally for. My mother spun toward him. Stephen. He kept looking down. We intended to replace it. When? I asked. Before or after my treatment was cancelled? He had no answer. Sean put the receipt down. If Heather knew even part of this and let me stand here defending her, we have a bigger problem than a ruined party. Heather's expression changed from panic to anger. So that's it? She shows up with paperwork and everyone turns on me. No one is turning on you, Sean said. I'm asking you a direct question. I didn't steal anything. You knew there was an account connected to her. I knew Mom and Dad had money. You asked whether Agnes was tracking it. Heather pointed at me. This is what she does. She picks the biggest room possible to fall apart in. I almost laughed. I haven't fallen apart once. That seemed to make her angrier than if I had screamed. She turned to the guests. She has always been jealous of me. Maureen shook her head. This is not Olivia being jealous. These are dates and signatures. One of my cousins quietly asked for a copy of the documents. Another relative left without saying goodbye. Sean's parents went to stand near their son. Carolyn reached for my arm again. We can discuss this privately. I stepped back. You already discussed me publicly. Think about what you're doing. I have. That's why there's a lawyer's letter in the envelope. Dad looked up sharply. What exactly are you asking for? A complete accounting. Preservation of every record. Repayment of money used outside the fund's purpose. From now on, anything about money goes through email or my lawyer. Carolyn wiped her face. You would sue your own parents? You spent my emergency fund and then mocked me for having an emergency. Heather made a broken sound and looked at Sean. You're really going to let her destroy this? He stared at her. I need time. He walked out with the ring box still in his hand. Heather followed him, calling his name. The photographer lowered her camera. A server began clearing untouched champagne from the nearest table. The party didn't end with screaming, broken decorations, or police. It ended with something worse for my mother. People stopped believing her story. Guests left early. Maureen asked for copies of the documents. Agnes took the coffee can home only after I promised I would use the money for the clinic payment. Dad tried to pull me aside in the parking lot. Your mother handled most of that, he said. Your signature is on the transfers. I was trying to avoid a larger conflict. You avoided conflict with her by making me pay for it. He looked older than he had that morning. I'll make this right. You'll respond to the lawyer. For the first time in my life, his disappointment didn't feel like a command. The next week was ugly, but it was concrete. My parents' attorney responded to the demand letter. There was no sweeping confession. Carolyn claimed several withdrawals had supported shared family expenses and indirectly benefited me. Our lawyer requested documentation. There was none. No tuition payment to my name. No medical payment on my behalf. No deposit into any account I controlled. The records showed transfers to my parents, payments associated with Heather's debt, the private loan my father had hidden, and engagement expenses. Stephen signed a written repayment plan first. Carolyn resisted until Agnes informed her that she was being removed from every remaining financial and estate role she still held. Agnes changed her estate paperwork and appointed an independent professional to manage anything that might require oversight. She also sent a letter to the family stating plainly that the fund had been intended for me, and that she had never authorized its use for Heather, my father's debt, or general family expenses. That letter mattered because my mother had spent years presenting Agnes as confused whenever her memory became inconvenient. Heather and Sean postponed wedding planning. They did not immediately break up. Real life was messier than that. Sean demanded full financial transparency, including Heather's debts, what she knew about the fund, and whether there were other family arrangements he had been misled about. Heather blamed me for the delay. She sent a message saying, "You got what you wanted. Everyone thinks I'm a thief now." I replied once, "I did not make you ask whether Grandma was still tracking the account. I did not make you accept money you suspected was connected to me. I did not make you mock my treatment. Do not contact me again unless it concerns repayment through the lawyer." Then I blocked her number. Some party extras were canceled. Heather and Sean lost deposits on upgrades they could no longer justify. Heather had to personally cover a portion of the catering and venue costs tied to the disputed transfers. Carolyn told relatives I had financially attacked my sister during the happiest time of her life. Maureen answered before I had to. "You used Olivia's name to move money," she told her. "You do not get to complain that Olivia used her own name to correct the record." Not every relative supported me. One uncle said I was right about the money but wrong about the timing. A cousin told me I should have handled it privately for Agnes's sake. Someone else said public humiliation never heals a family. Maybe they were right about one part. Public humiliation does not heal anything. But silence had not healed us either. Silence had only made the theft easier and the lies more believable. My parents had already made the dispute public. They had invited relatives to judge me, used Heather's party to frame me as greedy, and expected me to sit there smiling while my own medical fund paid for the room. A private correction would have disappeared into my mother's next story. The repayment plan, Agnes's cash, and the clinic's temporary arrangement allowed me to keep my treatment appointment. When I received the payment confirmation, I sat in my car and read the email 4 times. Appointment confirmed. It was only 2 words, but I cried harder than I had through the entire confrontation. Treatment was not magical. Recovery still hurt. There were appointments, exercises, bad nights, and days when I became furious at how much energy had been stolen from the actual problem by my family's behavior. But my physical therapy calendar stayed on the refrigerator. The clinic had my payment receipt. My records were organized. My parents could no longer interfere without creating another paper trail. I communicated with them only by email. Carolyn tried calling from other numbers twice. I did not answer. Dad emailed that he hoped we could move forward as a family. I responded that repayment was not reconciliation, and that any future relationship would require accountability without excuses. He did not reply. Agnes apologized to me more than once for waiting so long to check the account. I told her the blame belonged to the people who lied to both of us. She keeps her coffee in an actual canister now. The red can sits empty on top of her refrigerator. I asked why she hadn't thrown it away. "It reminds me to check the paperwork," she said. That sounded like her. Months later, Carolyn asked Maureen to arrange a family dinner where we could all put the unpleasantness behind us. I declined. I was not interested in a meal where peace meant I had to pretend theft was a misunderstanding, cruelty was stress, and my treatment had been an inconvenient interruption to Heather's celebration. My legs still hurt sometimes. My relationship with my parents remained distant. Heather still believed I had chosen the cruelest possible moment. Maybe I did choose a brutal moment. But they chose that room first. They chose to call me greedy in front of everyone. They chose to use a toast as a weapon. They chose to believe I would protect their image more fiercely than I protected myself. They said I ruined the engagement party. Maybe I did. But they ruined years of trust first, and I finally stopped paying for their version of peace with my body, my money, and my silence. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.